Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Cracking the Code Strategies for Communicating the Impact of Medical Affairs. For those I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Scott Thompson. I am the co-CEO here at Acceleration Point. And for the last 15 years, I've had just an amazing time working with medical affairs teams to really find ways to communicate and measure and improve their impact. And I am so excited for this session. It is one of our absolute favorite topics. We had an amazing turnout when we presented it at MAPS last year in Mass East, and it continues to be one of the most requested topics that we have. Today, I am super excited to have two folks that are going to just teach. They're going to share with you how this stuff actually works in real life. We've got Renu, who's the head of clinical Operations Program Management at Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine. And we have Traylor, our very own VP of Medical Affairs here at Acceleration Point. Thank you so much for both of you for joining us today. Really excited. Maybe just to give everybody some context before we jump into the content, I'd love to give you each just 30 seconds to introduce yourselves and tell everybody just kind of your background with this topic. Renu, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Scott. So during my 25 years career in pharmaceutical industry, I have done different roles: regulatory writing, submissions to FDA, and publication planning strategy, but quite some time in, I would say, medical affairs. And I have always been passionate about how do we prove or how do we really communicate the value of medical affairs to the organization, right? What do we bring to the table? How we are a strategic partner, not just a bridge, not just bringing information, but really a strategic partner with our R&D and commercial and bringing value to the organization. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Scott.
Great, Renu, thank you. I can't wait for you to tell everybody how you've been doing this at J&J. It's really exciting. Linda, do you want to give a hello to everyone?
Absolutely. So hello, everyone. I am Linda Traylor. As Scott said, I head up the medical excellence team at Acceleration Point. Like Renu, I've been in industry for 25 years and have worn many medical affairs hats. And I oftentimes refer to myself as a framework addict. And I think Acceleration Point has some of the best in class frameworks for helping us categorize, structure, and quantify what we oftentimes consider not to be quantifiable stuff that we do in medical affairs. We have to be able to quantify what we do in order to tell our impact story. And by the time we're done with this presentation, I hope you have some tools in your tool belt to go back and help build your impact story, because it's big. We have a big story to tell.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Linda. Before we get into a very specific model, specific approach to communicating and measuring the impact of medical affairs, I think it's important that we cover some of the challenges, right? Because it's a new topic, right? I was recently on the portal for MAPS. There's over 100 presentations on how to do this that all kind of end in, we're working on it, right? So I would love to maybe just cap those challenges really quick. And to do that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda, who's going to walk through some of the common challenges she's seen during her time in the industry.
Absolutely. I find it funny because we're in my entire career of medical affairs trying to tell the impact story, we're always trying to fit that square peg into a round hole when it comes to forcing those activity-driven metrics to tell our impact story. And today's conversation is going to be really around how we can overcome some of these challenges. So let's go to the next slide. Yeah, metrics don't tell our story because, again, we're just trying to force those activity metrics. I have gone to meetings where I'm bringing a storyline, and I know, Renu, you have too, where we talk about either the number of publications we've done or the number of congresses we're attending or how many interactions we've had, and we're trying to see, this is an impact we're making, and an impact, as we'll find out, is not about what you're doing. The impact is always on someone else, and we'll come to that. It needs to be about quality, not quantity. We say this all the time. It needs to be about quality, meaning it's the immeasurable, it's the stuff that is not quantifiable. What we do is hard to measure. But in reality, there are ways to provide structure to the system to quantify even what we think normally can't be quantifiable. So it is a common problem. Oh, this is the Venus, Mars, the whole conversation about commercial and medical affairs trying to communicate their value to one another in a compliant way. And we need to be able to speak a language, tell our impact story in a way that our colleagues have been doing it for many, many years. Can we do it as medical affairs and in a compliant way? I think it's a resounding yes, we can do it. We've seen it done, and there is a common language. Would you agree with that, Renu?
Yes. So, Linda, I mean, as you just said, and we also have to remember that when we are presenting it to senior leadership, right, presidents, VPs, and all, especially president of the business unit or the organization, they are commercial-minded people, right? So if we speak a different lingo that they don't relate to or they don't understand, it's very difficult to kind of get it across. So we talk about in our publications or otherwise, target audience, right audience at the right time. And we forget that when we're communicating internally, that we have to keep in mind who's our target audience when we are going to senior leadership presentation.
This is a great segue to this next slide, which says our systems are not set up right, making it really burdensome to get the data out. Whenever we're in those meetings, we need to be able to double click into that data. We're always going to get questions about whatever we're presenting. If we can't double click into the data to look at the nuance, to understand, okay, who is it and why do you have confidence in this data? And who is your audience and what did you do? And if we can't double click into our data, our system is not helping us tell our story.
Yeah, same thing, right? Like, oh, we MSLs, we met with 50 HCPs and every engagement was 45 minutes, right? So what? What? Right? If you can click on that data and say, yes, we moved this. And in medical affairs, our core job or activity is to present data, right? To present evidence. And hopefully then doctors take that evidence and make evidence-based decisions which are right for their patient, right? Moving them along in their journeys. If we can show how we are moving them along or impacting their thinking, medical adoption, then we are not, then it is so what? Big question there, right?
So those are definitely some of the top challenges that when the three of us are preparing, we hear all the time. I'd love to hear, what is your biggest challenge in measuring and communicating the impact of medical affairs? What are the biggest challenges you're facing? It could be one of the ones we said, hard systems, the right language, finding the right measure, making sure it's valuable. Give us a few words. Just tell us what your biggest challenge is. Getting the so what, right? You can have lots of activities, open text to pull out insights, right? Insights is such an important thing that we offer in medical affairs, but it's also often one of the hard things to quantify and pull. Having clear KPIs that actually demonstrate impact, right? Not just the activity. Wonderful. Measuring the impact, the so what of what we do. Excellent. Who else? Why is this so hard? Having the right measures, the sentiment and the manpower and the work that we're doing, how to quantify the things. Yeah, because everybody here can say, like in a description, here's our value, but it's hard to then quantify that, right? I remember not too long ago, I was confronted by a commercial leader who really kept hammering on what is that value of medical affairs. And finally I said, hey, you've got a product launching, right? Launch without them. Let's see what the value is. And they changed their tune real quick, but it's still not quantifiable. That's really hard to do. So I get it. Thank you. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to walk you through a framework, a model that we use when we work with clients to help craft the impact story of medical affairs. And I'll start it. And then as we go, Renu and Linda will talk about how they've been applying this with their teams and how it's impacting the way that medical affairs is thinking about their work and communicating impact. So this is the handout that you should have. If you don't just draw the triangle, you can follow right along. And the first thing I like to just make sure is that whenever we work on a KPI or measurement or an impact model, I always hear that there's three things that the team wants from that model. The first is they want to communicate their value. Okay, they want to be able to communicate the value that they're providing. Okay. The second is that teams need to use this in order to communicate and coach for performance, right? Like we have to be able to say, are we doing the things that we've signed up to do? And then the last piece, and this is really important, is that we want to be able to connect the work we're doing with our true purpose, right? Medical affairs, I mean, why I got into it and why I stayed with medical affairs is that there's this purpose higher than the day-to-day activity, and we need to make sure that we stay connected to it. So I'm going to show you how the Med Impact model achieves that. What we're going to do is we're going to start up here at the top. And the biggest challenge that I find most teams that are embarking on this journey run into is that they don't separate three very important and very distinct things. They try to smash it all together into one. The first is, what is the impact you're actually trying to make, right? The impact and the activity can never be the same thing, right? So we're going to drill into impact and how to define that. The second is that within medical affairs, you're part of a bigger system, contribution. So each team contributes to that impact. You go to one MSL, say, you need to go change this in this clinic by this. No, that's not how it works, right? We generate data, we get it validated in the industry, we educate on it, we provide resources on it. Like there's all this work that's done, and collectively that has the impact. So that's true, but we also still need to be able to talk about, well, how does field medical contribute? How does SciComm contribute? Like, what are we signing up to do? And is it leading to that impact? And then finally, we're going to get into execution. Okay, execution is the day-to-day activities that we committed to that we believe will lead to those outcomes of the contribution that has the impact. And if we can really separate impact from contribution, from execution, how we go about these measures becomes a lot simpler. So we're going to drill right into impact right now. And I'm going to turn this over to Linda to talk to us about three things. The first is how we work to increase scientific awareness so that it has an impact on the beliefs in the medical community that leads to actions within the medical community. So I'm going to turn this over to Linda to show us what that looks like in the work that Renu and Linda have been doing.
Yeah, so I think one of the key things that Scott just mentioned is that that's why activities that we're doing, like engaging with physicians, a number of interactions, number of publications, number of educational programs, never tell our impact story because that's not the impact, that's stuff we're doing. And so the impact that we're trying to make is always going to be on the medical community with the ultimate North Star of improving patient lives. But our role in medical affairs, the organization as a whole, is going to be moving the needle to impact patient lives, not just medical affairs. You ask anybody in regulatory or other divisions what they got into the industry for is to improve patient lives. But it's always going to be on someone else. And so when it comes to us assessing how we're going to impact that, we start with the end in mind. What is the clinical behavior we care about? And we need to get as specific as we can, because even though we're not going to be in the clinic evaluating and seeing their behavior, we can assess as medical affairs professionals their beliefs behind those behaviors. And that's what we can quantify. In order to impact beliefs, we are going to have that scientific exchange to raise awareness so that we can assess the belief. So there is a process, a story, a narrative that gets us to impacting patient lives through understanding the clinical behaviors we care about and the beliefs behind them and our ability to increase their awareness.
Absolutely well said. That end in mind. What are we trying to achieve, right? Where do we want this HCP to be? And then we say, okay, this thinking or this awareness or this data, yeah, we achieved what we were trying to achieve, right? If we don't define it up front, then we're not going to get it. But the other part you said was belief. What do they believe at this point? More importantly, why? If we don't know that why, then we won't be able to change that belief, right? If we just say, oh, they think negatively about this data or they think positively or whatever, right? They are a strong advocate or not. So absolutely that end in mind, belief, but also why in there.
All right, absolutely. Thank you. So the process is start mapping the behaviors that we care about to the mindsets. And mindsets are really structured to help quantify the HCP's understanding of our key science, the beliefs in the narrative. And this could be unmet need, mechanism of action, clinical outcomes, efficacy, treatment differentiation. Whatever that core narrative is that gets us to the behavior we care about, that's really what we need to define and get as specific as we can so that we can put measures against them. Because in the end, the mindset alignments must be baselined and tracked longitudinally if we're going to measure impact. Why is this important? The story is not how many interactions we've had with the HCPs. And we want to be able to say that 25% of the HCPs believe there's an unmet need at the beginning of the year. And by the end of the year, based on our assessment of mindset and belief, that 75% of HCPs believe that there's an unmet need. And the whys behind that are going to help us turn these insights into action.
Right, right. And Linda, I mean, if you have a new class of product that is not out there, that happened with GLP-1s in our diabetes areas, right? You can go and talk about efficacy, safety, whatever you want. But if they don't believe that we need another class of products, that there is actually an unmet need that we need to fulfill, that efficacy and safety is not going to drive anything, right? That's not going to change their behavior. So very important to unmet need. And of course, mechanism of action, all endocrinologists or specialists are going to really want to know, or pharmacists want to know mechanism of action. Primary care may not care, right? They want to know more about efficacy. So you again have to come up with that target audience and target data or information for your HCP.
As I've had a chance to see this work unfold, it's always really exciting because the first step isn't the KPIs. It's not the measures. Defining what those behaviors are, what the beliefs are that lead to it, and then what is the scientific content, the scientific narrative that we're trying to increase awareness of that we think is going to lead to that change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Linda to actually walk through an example with us, because once this is defined, and you'll see how we define it, how we actually write it down, then we can use all sorts of measures to help see if that's changing over time. And we work to get the most specific yet practical measure we can. So some of those actions might be visible in claims data. Some of them we might have to ask. Some of them might show up in social media, right? But if we start with a common definition of what we're looking for, then we can all calibrate on how we collect that data. And often, right, Linda, the most prevalent source is actually MSLs after every interaction, just capturing, here's what I heard them say, here's the belief, and here's why they believe it. So let me give it back to you to actually walk through an example, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So some guidelines for writing the mindset, HCP mindset alignment statements is really to first be as specific as you can, align when defining the mindset that's aligned to your scientific narrative. And you've got to connect it and map it to the behavior we care about so that we can, when the belief changes, we can infer that the behavior will be influenced. And then it really needs to be focused, as each statement should really assess only one specific belief. The more you make it complex where you have more than one belief in a mindset, then it makes it harder for, let's say, the MSL to go into the system and assess, because there are too many, it's muddled by too many mindsets. So keep it singular, keep it focused on the behavior we care about, the mindset, and then it needs to be clear and distinct anchor statements so that it's easy to assess for the MSL or whoever is doing the assessment. An example is provided in this slide. I'm going to have to blow it up really quick so I can see it. Okay, so the example is, let's say the strategic goal is ensuring that the HCPs recognize a specific unmet need in your disease state. And if we're going to create a mindset statement around that, the HCP believes there's a significant unmet need for treatments that effectively reduces, say, inflammation in your disease. So you need to get specific on what it is, the belief we care about, and the behavior. And so the anchor statements that we want to put together to be able to measure them is you're going to always start with your extremes. You're not aligned and you're fully aligned. And you're going to be as detailed as possible, but as flexible as possible for the MSL not to, or whoever is assessing the HCP mindset. They need to be able to visualize whether, based on their conversation with the HCP, if they're not aligned or aligned, fully aligned. And once you start there, then you can fill in the neutral alignment and the positive alignment. So we're going to go through a very specific example to show exactly what this means. That's just the high-level definition. And I've worked directly with Renu within her company to help put together this scientific narrative. But it's really critical for this narrative. Usually, as Renu was saying earlier, we often go straight to the data, like safety and efficacy data when we're talking to clinicians. But they can agree with the data all day long, but yet not make any clinical decisions or change behavior based on it because they don't necessarily believe there's an unmet need, or they understand what good looks like in clinical practice, or whether or not they understand how the drug works, which could impact clinical decision making. So that is really how you initiate define the behaviors you care about and the beliefs associated with them and the narrative that leads you to the behavior change.
Right. Absolutely, Linda. I mean, I would say to everybody who's attending, this is one of the two money slides in the whole presentation, right? If you get this right and you know how to set it up, then you are like, we went and met them 5 times, or we went with this proactive tag or this medical education or whatever. I mean, as I said in the beginning, so what? But what changed? How did you move the needle, right? If you can show that objectively and clearly, then really communicating that impact story is going to be muddy. That's not going to be very clear. And I think Scott said in the beginning, even though our MSLs are our eyes and ears in the field, but it is when we show impact, it's the impact of all the activities, right? Presenting at congresses, publications, medical education, CME programs, cell material, the training or advisory boards and everything that comes together to make that impact, right? But very, very important to know clearly what behavior you want and a very clear statement on what negative alignment looks like and neutral alignment looks like or positive.
Absolutely. So in order for you to be able to visualize that, we're just going to do an example. We're going to do the work. And so I'm going to quickly provide some context. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense to do the work. So we're going to put together a hypothetical case study here. I'll review it for you. And we're going to call this a biologic that's a topical immune modulator. It's for a rare disease called parapsoriasis, which is different from psoriasis. This team is 1 year post-launch, and the current guidelines is that after you apply a topical or you treat, that you're looking for a 75% reduction in symptoms. The standard of care are other anti-inflammatory topicals, over-the-counter mostly. It also requires continuous monitoring because it is a different disease. It's a rare disease, not psoriasis. It's parapsoriasis, which can be misdiagnosed as psoriasis and leads to the wrong type of treatment. So there is a patient risk here. And so the medical affairs goal for 2024 is to understand the receptiveness of dermatologists and allergists for elevating treatment goal to greater than 90% symptom reduction to improve the quality of life outcomes so that we can assess data gaps by the end of Q3 2024. So we're very specific goal, what we want, who we want to hear from, what we want to hear, why we want to hear it. So that's part of the process. So in order to set up a mindset alignment, as I said, is first of all, define a behavior that we care about and the beliefs associated with it. And so our aspirational mindset, the HCP believes that the quality of life endpoints are critical to improve patient outcomes. So if we're going to ask them to change guideline based on the fact that it's going to improve quality of life, then we need to understand whether or not they believe that quality of life endpoints are critical. And we always start with the extreme, the positive alignment and the full alignment. And in this case, I'm going to give you the full alignment, which is essentially the aspirational mindset. The HCP believes that the patient well-being and everyday experience are key measures of treatment success. So if this is your full alignment for the dermatologist and allergist, your target audience, let's work together as a group now to put together a negative alignment. So Scott, I'm going to turn it back over to you to collect the information.
So why doesn't everybody just take a moment to think about what would the negative alignment statement be and just type it into the chat, right? This is kind of some practice here. So let's put into the chat what the negative alignment statement might look like. Put it in, hit enter. Give everybody a moment to participate here. Right. So if the full alignment is HCP believes that patient well-being and everyday experiences are the key measures of treatment success, what would it sound like coming out of an HCP's conversation if they did not believe that? They believe the opposite of that.
Yeah. So like full alignment, they do believe that quality of life endpoints are important, right? Yeah. They do show the patient improved outcomes.
Absolutely. HCPs believe that the quality of life endpoints are not needed to show improvement to patient outcome. Yep, HCP doesn't believe. Yep. HCP believes only disease improvement is important. Absolutely. And these are great examples, and they're specific enough because whoever's filling out this mindset alignment for this HCP, they would be able to say, connect this anchor statement with when they're engaging with the HCP and be able to assess accurately. Yeah, this person feels like they're a negative alignment because they just don't support use of quality of life measures in clinical practice. And so these are great examples.
Yeah, they don't think quality of life measurements are credible enough or scientific enough or clinical enough or whatever is their reason, right? But yeah, they are not aligned with that. Yeah.
Great example. So let's kind of fill it in. If we were on a neutral, so negatives, they don't believe quality of life is important. A full alignment is that they do. A neutral alignment is that they might consider as a complement to traditional clinical measure. And then maybe a positive alignment was HCPC's value and understanding treatment impact on the quality of life and is willing to pilot in maybe a subset of patients, like sort of believes it and is willing to operationalize it, but not quite there. So they need to be able to be distinct from one another so that there is an ability to make that assessment.
So this is the crux, this very beginning, most important step that most people skip, right? They go straight to field medical and say, hey, come up with metrics. Hey, PsyCom, go come up with metrics. But if you don't know what you're contributing to, you can't be part of an impact story. So I'd love to hear from you where you are in this process. Is this something you've tried before? Is it something that kind of new? So just give me a 1, 2, or 3 in the chat. 1 is that this type of scientific journey is not yet clearly defined in your organization with this level of detail. Number 2 is that we measure this, but it's very informal through insights. We don't have it all well laid out, or you systematically and regularly, and you could tell me the change that has occurred in the clinical behavior, in the beliefs from 1 year to the next. Absolutely. And that is such a good place to start. The fact that you're able to do this through insights, but that's a lot of work. And it's also requires a whole lot of interpretation. So one of the first recommendations that we have is to actually take this model, define it out yourself. If you want help, Linda can certainly help you guys do it. But you define out what these beliefs are, and your first place to start capturing that is after every field medical interaction, right? If it's all built into CRM like it is, like Renu has, right? And after every interaction, I go, oh, I heard you speak about MOA, and here's my alignment statement. This is their degree of alignment. But then the key important part, as Renu said earlier, is capturing why they believe that or why they don't. So you know what you can go do about it. And you can start to see over time where people get stuck, because you can take that scientific journey, line them up and go, wow, people don't actually care about my safety data if they don't believe there's an unmet need, right? Maybe they need to know that they could have access to it before they care about how it works, right? So you have to define what that journey is for you. And when you can get collection data this precise, you can see these changes over time. And then you can use lagging indicators like claims data, like social analysis, to identify areas where you can further improve.
That's a good point, Scott. But I would just add one thing here is that you don't go to your HCPs and start asking, here is my scientific journey. Do you align to neutral or positive or negative, right? Because you have clearly defined it, you have your usual regular conversation. And because it is now MSL to MSL should be consistent. And that is, I see deficiency in your insights, because they will be different versions of the same scientific sentiment, right? Because you haven't defined it, you haven't clearly said what neutral means and what positive means and what negative means and what behavior you are trying to change, right? So you still have your regular conversations that may be KOL engagement, advisory board, or MSL engagements, or authors meeting or other things. But then when you come back from that conversation, then you capture or you think through, this is what I heard. And it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, but as accurate as possible, because as Linda said in the beginning, is not just quantity, but the quality of the things that we are capturing in CR data.
So that is the place to start, right? Define the impact you want to have. It's always outside of your organization. Otherwise, your organization wouldn't exist, right? The thing you do is what you do. The impact is the result of it. So that's part one. And we gave you some ideas on how to document that over time. There's more you can do with, again, things like claims analysis, social analysis to see the lagging indicator. But every interaction start by getting the leading indicator. Okay. So now what we're going to do is jump into how do you then talk about the contribution of an individual team toward that goal? And there's really three things that you need to do in order to have a good value story about your contribution, right? So the first is you need to define a specific outcome that you are shooting for. And guess where those outcomes come from? The impact. Right? The outcome should be things like increase awareness of X, increase understanding of Y, change belief of this, right? I am doing an activity targeted at one of those things, right? Then the second thing you do is you want to have a measurement of the progress and impact of that contribution. And then finally, there's always a story, right? And this is where we need to make sure that we actually talk about the processes and the sequence that any team goes through to show progress, because sometimes those outcomes might take a year, might take two, and you need a smaller degree of measurement along the way to know that you're making progress. And so the third bullet here is story. And I'm not going to say any more because I know this is Renu's favorite part about what that story looked like.
So this is kind of what Renu started off saying. We've got to be able to communicate in a language that our cross-functional colleagues understand. And we got our impact story at the top left, and the contributions that each of the teams or each of the initiatives make to have an impact on that can be summarized in your other dashboard. An example is medical education on the upper right, our social media on the bottom left, or enrollment in clinical study on the bottom right. But in the end, it's the contribution that each makes needs to be able to tell a story that connects directly to the outcomes we care about, the impact story, and that's usually a belief associated with the clinical behavior we care about. And I know, Renu, I'll turn it over to you because I know you.
Thank you, Linda. I mean, this is the second money slide. right? This is what really gets attention. They are used to seeing those 4 boxes from their marketing and sales, right? Market share and other stuff. So in my mind, whenever you're presenting data, you're presenting impact, it shouldn't take more than 30 seconds for the viewer to understand what you're talking, right? If they're really looking at it, confused, and it takes them minutes to figure it out, your data is not visual enough, it's not clear enough, it's not impactful enough, right? So it is very clear that we are speaking the language of our senior leaders whom we are talking to, whom we are showing this impact, and how do we show that the impact is very, very clear, right? We have been talking about KOL alignment, right? We move them from negative to neutral to positive, but it's not going to happen in a month. It's not going to happen in 2 months, right? As Scott was saying, it's a long journey, and leadership needs to understand that behaviors. And I mean, think about yourself. Anything we are trying to change in our own awareness, in our own behavior, doesn't happen overnight, right? And all these 4 boxes can be different things that are important to your company. That may be enrollment in a clinical trial, that may be a genetic testing, how we are impacting that in a place, or adoption of a companion diagnostic, or whatever that is. These can be different things that is important to your organization to show that.
So let's continue with the example we already shared earlier, and let's just fast forward. We've given the direction to the field medical team to go out and assess 500 dermatologists and 500 allergists, and we've collected data. We've collected the whys behind the data. And after we analyze, we come back and find out that the HCPs support increasing the treatment goal, the guideline treatment goal, reduction of 75% of symptoms to 90%. Meaning, in the dermatology space, the majority of them were positively aligned to switching the guideline. But in the allergist space, it turns out that they were neutrally or negatively aligned primarily. So we have 2 different specialties kind of saying the same thing. And the dermatologist's reason for support in our analysis is data are strong enough for guideline submission and will have significant impact on patient adherence. So we heard that theme over and over again. That's the underlying reason. So that can allow us to really focus and build up the dermatology cohort. But the allergists need some work if we're going to use them in the guidelines. So we need to assess whether their support is critical for changing the guidelines. What do they need? Some of the skepticism is around the endpoint is pharma contrived, not nearly enough data for a rare disease. So if we're going to need those allergists, the strategic decision we need to make is if we need them, we need to understand how we can impact that mindset and shift it to more positive to gain alignment before we go aggressively after that initiative. So that's an example of how you can go out and collect data and build a confident story around it. That's where having a good platform allows you to double click into the data to see how it differs. Is it consistently captured? What is the end behind it? Is it explicit? Is it recent? Who said it? All of that leads to us being able to say, this is robust data. We can act on it. We can take the next steps to get to the impact that we need.
Absolutely. So we've talked about the impact and keeping that isolated, the impact that happens in the clinic, in the medical community. We talked about how we then have to look at each team and say, what is the contribution? What is the outcome they want to drive? Have a measure that is as specific and practical as possible. So some of those examples that they showed you around increasing study site enrollment, it could be the impact or reach of particular medical topics, the number of people who are aware, and building a story. Story, for example, in SciComm might be that you have an adequate share of scientific voice, that a number of people have accessed that information, that over time, the duration and the volume of people talking about that piece has increased. That is a value story that the SciComm team, as an example, can work on. And it's different for field medical and for the other team. So it's really defining that hierarchy of a story. The last step is execution. And I know a lot of folks want to really shy away from actually talking about metrics, but metrics help us know if we're doing the things that we need to do. And so the 3 steps to that, the first is to have priorities. priorities is what you choose to use your time on. Right? What do you choose to use your time on? The second is capacity, right? How much of something can I do and still maintain quality? And the last piece is capabilities. This is your competency model, your coaching, your observations, right? And so when we look at it, it's, hey, maybe if all I was doing, let's take field medical as an example, if all I was doing was KOL engagement, maybe I could do 2 or 3 a day, right? But that's not all I'm doing, so I have to prioritize. So what percentage of my time am I going to do that? Maybe I could run 3 medical education programs in a week. But from a prioritization standpoint, is that what I'm going to do? And then the capabilities is, do I do it well? Do I follow a set of standards? So I'm going to just turn it over to Renu and Linda again, just to talk through some of the measures that we use around execution.
Yeah, Linda, I would just say here is to start slide prioritization. I would add a word ruthless prioritization, right? If you don't do that, we are very good at prioritizing. We are really not good at deprioritizing. Well, if we don't do ruthless prioritization, guess what? Some things just take your full attention and full time and real focus, right? If you are still trying to do this thing and that thing, oh, by the way, I can't let it go. That's my dear project. You're just not going to get there, right? I think Linda talked about 500 dermatologists and 500 allergists. I wonder how big is the MSL team to go to 5,000 people, right? So again, never overpromise and underdeliver. Really look at your capacity. Really look at how much, 50%, 60%, 70%, what percentage of your time you can spend on this said activity that we are going to embark on. But consider that, otherwise you're setting yourself up for failure if you don't.
That's exactly the words I was going to use, is that if you don't, and I love your ruthless prioritization comment, because if you don't, it's paralyzing to the teams. You truly are setting them up for failure if you don't let them know what the strategic decisions you are making in the upcoming months and why you need the information so that they can prioritize their time appropriately. And because it's critical part of it.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that we do lack, right, versus first, is prioritize what we're going to do and look at our capacity to do it. And then I know that early we had a lot of folks that were with the medical excellence operations type folks on the line. Guess what? This is where you live, right? Like, to increase our capacity. Now, we might not choose to do more of that thing that you've increased our capacity to do. We might, but it does provide opportunity to prioritize additional things. Let's face it, in medical affairs, there's always going to be more we could choose to do than we have the time and energy to do. So we have to prioritize. Before we get to our closing here, I want to just go back to this because we started with, we wanted to have a way through the reports and KPIs and impact story to make sure that we brought out a communication of the value, coach to performance, and to tie our people to purpose so they stay motivated. And the way that I've always seen it roll out, the way I've always seen the conversations unfold, is that when we can be really clear that this is the impact that we're making, and we can measure it and see it, right? That impact measure makes it to CEO and board level slides. When was the last time they reported to the board of directors the number of HCP interactions you had? Never, right? This is what makes it, and they say, here's what medical affairs is doing, okay? But when you have impact and you understand how a team, and you have a story about how you're contributing to that, guess what? That is value, right? That is having your value story for your team. And then when you can be really clear, these are the outcomes that your team is contributing, right? The things that we've achieved, and you know how you perform, your execution against it, that you did all the things you promised to do, guess what? That's performance. And we have a performance model, a coaching model that really takes those two and combines it, right? Because you could get outcomes and not do it the right way. I call that lucky. It's not sustainable, right? You could be doing everything right and not get the outcomes. It's really trying. right? And you need coaching. We need to work on the strategy. But if you're not doing the right things and you're not getting out the gun, sorry, that's just called failure. And then finally, if we're doing things right and we're driving the outcomes, that's our definition of success. So if anybody is interested in the coaching model, just let us know. We'll be happy to send it to you. And then finally, when people understand what they do day in, day out, they understand what they're executing, and they see how it's making a difference in the awareness, the beliefs, and the action, guess what? Now I have purpose. Now I have something that I'm excited to tell my kids that I'm working on, that I do, right? And my neighbors, and it becomes something very, very motivating. So I hope everybody found a lot of value out of this approach. There's two things I'd like to close with. The first is it's typically what you caught, not what is taught, that has the biggest impact when you get back to your everyday life here. It would be an honor to let Renu and Linda know, what was the most important thing you took out of this session? If you had to hear that one thing that can make a difference, what is it? Put that in the chat for us. Let us know what that one big thing is that really made a difference for you.
While people are filling that in, I just want to echo the importance of the communication back to your teams on why you're doing the things you're doing, because it makes a difference in their motivation.
And I think also closing the loop, right? If they did something that contributed to impact and senior leadership really appreciated that, make sure it goes back to the people who were at the ground level who made it, right? So that they continue to be in the loop and continue to be contributor to that impact.
So we have some folks that have jumped in with building the effective journey, going through the case study, what a good scientific journey looks like, focus on HCP mindset, the ladder, right? How do you build that ladder up towards it? Love that. Confirmed a lot of what my team is already doing and need to be more defined. Yeah, the more we can be crisp and clear, that's better, right? Delivering a framework for an HCP mindset, measurable over time, right? You can start to see how things change. Absolutely. Thank you. We have 1 minute left, and here's what I'd like to do. We had over 50 people join. I am so thrilled. I don't know if you can tell, but Renu, Linda, and I absolutely love sharing. Renu and Linda both are so generous with their time, whether it's with us or with MAPS or with the MSL Society. They love to give back to this community, and we would like to do the same. So one last thing I'd ask you to do is, out of everything you heard today, because we couldn't cover everything that we wanted to in 1 hour, right? We would be here all day. Out of everything on this screen, what would you like the next workshop to be? If you happen to be a Quello subscriber and you put it in, we'll contact you and we can actually do it with your team, with your data, with your strategies. So we'll come right in and work with you. For everybody else, put the topic that you would like most for us to then continue to provide materials and content on, and we'll use that in our prioritization. So if you could just drop that in, I would really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, we will do the ruthless prioritization. We asked.
No.
Yeah.
All right. So the evaluating performance part. Okay. So we'll dig in deeper and actually show you how to build the impact dashboard, perhaps. The use of AI. Sandra, yes. We had an amazing insights workshop last month, and that was the number one asked. So we are preparing a very, very hands-on AI workshop for this community. So keep an eye open for that. AI utilization, how to measure and report qualitative impact more. Okay, so we can dig into that impact section and actually walk through how to build it. Another vote for AI. AI is amazing. For those of you who are Quello subscribers, I know most of you have started getting the AI functionality turned on. So that's exciting, getting some positive feedback, but it goes beyond one application and one tool for AI. So we will be doing a session here on the application of AI for medical affairs. I'm really excited about it. There's also a precursor to that. The topic that we have up for you next month is called the Digital Ready Medical Affairs Team. And it's a workshop about the technologies, including AI, that are coming, that we're seeing go live in medical affairs, going beyond talking about it to actually seeing it work, and what you need to do to get ready, the things you can do before they even turn it on to make sure that it's meaningful and impactful. So, Renu, Linda, thank you so much. This was so much fun, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you for everybody who's contributed to the session, and we'll be in touch on additional content. And for anybody who is a Cola subscriber, we'll be in touch to answer your specific question. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful week, everybody.